So hey everybody, Arcana the Wizard here, and stuck in the woods right now. I've been wandering for a little while. I've actually been exiled from the apartment, but that doesn't mean that I haven't been thinking about more games from my childhood. So as we've talked about before, I like games that deal with puzzles and activating the mind, and right now I've got a problem that needs some puzzling out, and I could use a little bit of activation in my own mind. There are a lot of thoughts in there, a lot of things going on, and it almost feels like the best thing for me to do would just be to take a trip inside my own mind and sort things out. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's take a trip inside my confused and disordered mind. Join me, won't you, for another game from my childhood. Well, that actually worked. Welcome, friends and neighbors, to the inner recesses of my mind. Don't spend a lot of time figuring out how we got here, and instead, let's just use this as a perfect segue to talk about a computer game from my childhood, The Lost Mind of Dr. Brain. We've already talked quite a bit about the educational games that I played from the Learning Company, but now we're going to talk a little bit about some educational games from Sierra. Specifically the Dr. Brain series, a series of 4 puzzle games all revolving around the character of Dr. Brain, who's kind of a combination absent-minded professor, mad scientist type of deal. The Lost Mind of Dr. Brain is the 3rd game in this series. Before we talk about that game, we need to talk a little bit about the first 2 games in the series, the Castle of Dr. Brain and the Island of Dr. Brain. I never played the Castle of Dr. Brain, and I only played the Island of Dr. Brain a couple of times and don't have any real strong memories of it, but both of these games are structured kind of in a similar way. In both of these games, you are exploring the various rooms of the castle or the island belonging to Dr. Thaddeus Egghead Brain, who is, like I said, a mad scientist slash absent-minded professor who absolutely loves puzzles. He loves them so much that he's put them everywhere, and you have to solve a puzzle or a series of puzzles in each room before you can move on to the next one and eventually explore all the rooms in either the castle or the island. There's a wide variety of puzzles here, each of them testing different intelligences, and you can play each of them at one of 3 difficulty levels. The novice level, the lowest difficulty level, will earn you a bronze plaque if you solve the puzzle correctly. The middle level, the expert level, will get you a silver plaque, and the genius level will get you a gold plaque. This is great if you're good at certain things, like, say, music. You can play those types of puzzles at the genius level, but not so good at other things like maneuvering around a 3D space. You can play those at the novice level. That's the first 2 games. They're both pretty similar in structure, but The Lost Mind of Dr. Brain took the series in a much, much different direction. First of all, there's an actual story to speak of. Now, Dr. Thaddeus P. Brain, the P stands for puzzles, is conducting an experiment concerning puzzles and human intelligence. He's figured out a way to transfer the intelligence of one creature to another, and he's already successfully managed to transfer the intelligence of his lab rat, Rathbone, to that of a honeybee.
Now we've got cheese bees.
And now he wants to conduct the experiment again, only this time he wants to transfer some of his intelligence to his lab rat, Rathbone.
My confidant and closest friend.
And isn't that just a little bit sad? But as often happens with mad scientists, the experiment goes horribly wrong. Dr. Brain transfers too much of his intelligence over to Rathbone, and Rathbone kind of turns into this weird hybrid of lab rat and Dr. Brain, whereas Dr. Brain is basically brain dead. And so now it is your job to physically go inside Dr. Brain's brain and solve a bunch of puzzles in the different sections of his brain in order to get his brain back to normal. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's a computer game. We'll go with it. So the structure of the game is already pretty different from the first 2 games. Those games were linear games, like you had to solve the puzzle in one room before you could move on to the next. But with this one, the puzzles are structured in groups. You've got 10 sections of the brain and 10 different types of puzzles, and you can solve them in any order you want to, and you can move back and forth between them. Which means if you're solving one particular type of puzzle, and again, you're like me, and you get kind of bored or tired or stuck at one part, then you can take a break from that, get out of that section, and move on to another section that you might have a little bit of an easier time with. So your task is to solve enough puzzles in each section in order to complete that section of the brain. And the difficulty level that you solve the puzzle on, again, novice, expert, or genius, will determine how much of that section of the brain you solve. 5% for novice, 10% for expert, and 15% for genius. There are 10 groups of puzzles, and I'd like to talk about each of them individually, but actually do have a little bit of work I need to do in here, so if you don't mind too terribly, I'm going to have to move around the different sections of the brain and figure some things out. There we go. So, just like before, each of the games tests several different types of intelligences, and one of the most basic things that you can test is memory, which is what you get with the game file sorting. When you travel into this section of the brain, and indeed most of the sections of the brain, you are joined by the Rathbone/Dr. Brain hybrid type character who helps you along the way and gives you instructions and that sort of thing. And in each section of the brain, Rathbone takes on a particular personality, and in this one, in file sorting, he takes on the personality of the guy who hosted the Twilight Zone for some reason.
You have entered another dimension, a dimension of memory and mind.
And so while you're in the file sorting zone, you are given various objects, usually very strange objects, and you have to file them away somewhere in one of the open filing cabinets you have at your disposal. But then later in the game, Rathbone will name those same items and you have to remember where you put them. At the novice level, that's really all there is to it, but at the expert and genius level, Rathbone will move the files around every so often, you know, just to mess with you. It's not here. I'm gonna have to move on to some different brains. Oh, great. In Pentoad, you have to do something similar. Some lights. In this game, Rathbone is a weird British gentleman, I guess, I don't know, and he is giving you a series of spoken symbols which you have to match with their visual components. When he names a symbol, you put it on a grid, and you have to remember what it looks like because you have to match the visual symbols together on the grid, 2 or more together.
Plutonium. Francium.
The expert and genius levels make things a little bit harder for you by blocking off certain portions of the grid, as well as shortening the amount of time that you have to place something. In addition, you can choose between 4 different symbol groups depending on what you're most proficient in. You can choose Roman numerals, Greek letters, sign language symbols, or chemical elements. Oh, that's where I am. Where's the light? Ah, there we go. Oh, good. Exactly where I was hoping to be. In the music region, which, as you might expect, was my best region, you are given a series of scrambled classical tunes. Rathbone von Brain, a classical/Baroque composer, probably Baroque because he's sitting at a harpsichord, but that's it, well, whatever.
Let's solve the scrambled music puzzles.
Rathbone will play the piece it's supposed to sound, and then you have to use your listening skills in order to fix the piece in front of you so that it also plays the right way. No, that's not. Now, it helps to be able to read music because the actual music is in front of you, but it's not strictly necessary. All you have to do is really just listen. Now, at the novice level, the measures are just mixed up, but at the expert level, some of the measures are actually backwards, and at the genius level, some of them are upside down. Ooh. There we go. No, it's not here either. I'm gonna have to keep looking. Why are all of these things in the dark? Oh, here we go. Some of the puzzles will test your ability to navigate through a 3D space, like Mural Names, which takes you through a 3-dimensional series of tunnels with Bronx sewage worker Rathbone, or something, I don't know.
We got a lot of way to go and not a lot of time. Besides, my coffee's getting cold.
In this puzzle, you have to make your way through a maze that exists on different levels. And you have to move up and down through these different levels and figure out the mechanics of how this maze works so you can get to the finish. At the novice level, you're only working on 3 levels, but at the expert and genius levels, they add more. E.T., what are you doing in here? Never mind. I need help finding... Yeah, I know what you're looking for. Great, can you help me find it? Yeah, I can help. Okay, good. You're gonna want to get to the train station. The fastest way is to cut through that section there, right where the camera is. That'll take you to the unfinished section of the brain, the one that's still developing. You cut through there, go past the library, take a right at the rec center, and that'll take you right to the train station. Sounds simple enough? Thanks, E.T. Well, this looks pretty unfinished. In the puzzle game 3D construction, you have to build a 3D object. It's just colored blocks, but you have to look at the plan, the diagram, and build it exactly as it's planned out. You get help from the foreman, who is once again Rathbone, and this time...
Look at me, I'm Swedish.
No, you're not. Yeah, bad accents seem to be a thing with this game, but it's kind of funny. And once again, at the expert and genius levels, they add more levels for you to build on and make the shapes that much more complex. This looks promising. Nothing. Alright, keep going to the library. Now, it's not just three-dimensional spaces that you're tested in. Two-dimensional spaces get tested too, like in the game Word Surge. In the game Word Surge, the vaguely Shakespearean character Rathbone gives you a grid of letters and a list of words.
Oh, sweet mystery of letters and words, rapid in thy twisted, swirling mind.
And you have to rearrange the letters, adjusting either the individual rows or the individual columns to spell all of the words on the list. And they can be spelled forward, backwards, up, down, diagonally, whatever.
Ingenious!
The novice level gives you a 3x3 grid, the expert level a 4x4, and the genius level a 5x5. And again, even though this game is about words and it's called Word Surge, it's not really testing your knowledge of these words. You don't necessarily have to know what these words are, although they are by and large pretty simple words. You just have to be able to manipulate the grid to spell the words. So it's really more of a maze than anything. Speaking of which... Motor programming is another sort of variant on a maze. In this one, you have to control the little computerized Dr. Brain to move around a grid and collect brains.
Hello, I am Rathbot.
To do this, you have to write a program, and it doesn't require you to have any sort of knowledge of computer programming or anything like that. The commands are very simple: move forward, turn left, turn right, that sort of thing. But you only have a limited amount of space, and so you have to write a program so that Dr. Brain can collect all of the brains in this grid. Things get more complicated in the expert and genius levels when you have one and then two subroutines that you also have to program. Let's see, came this way, take a right, and train station. Mess. Let's wonder if there's anything done. In the game Train of Thought, Rathbone is Rathbone O'Brain, an allegedly Irish train conductor.
Oh, sure, and begor, I am the engineer of this here train of thought of a choo-choo-choo through the heather of me mind. All aboard!
I'm ashamed to admit that I tried to emulate that accent through much of my early adolescence. In this game, you have to control the turns in the track so that the different ideas, which are actually different colored balls, which come onto the track can be docked in a particular order as Rathbone calls them. You have to keep the wrong idea from going into the dock at the wrong time and also keep the different balls from crashing into each other. At the expert and genius levels, of course, more balls are released and the tracks get a little bit more complicated and it's harder to control. Let's see, there's what we're looking for. Just drag that over to me, and that should do it. Get out of here. Maybe there's a map on here somewhere. Okay. Finally, in the Synaptic Cleft, you have Rathbone Joe Bob, a cowboy who is herding cows. Well, not so much cows as neurotransmitters.
Yep. Today is roundup time on the Synaptic Cleft Brain Range, partner. Now let's get out there and punch us a neurotransmitter or two. Yeehaw!
Yes, it seems that in this part the reconstruction is a little bit more literal. You have to guide the neurotransmitter cows from one side of the synaptic cleft to the other. You do this by clicking your mouse cursor, which causes a repelling force which pushes the cows away from your mouse cursor, and
ideally, into the other side of the cleft. At higher difficulty levels, you have to deal with obstructions in your way, some of which repel the cows and some of which attract them. This game doesn't require as much puzzling as the others. I wouldn't really consider it a puzzle as much as kind of an arcade type game. It's more a test of how well you can use a mouse cursor. It's a test of eye-hand coordination and reaction time. But it's also a game that you can basically just kind of force your way through. If you play on an easy enough level and you click long enough, you'll eventually win. At higher difficulty levels, you have a limited amount of time because the neurotransmitters will disappear from the other side the longer you wait. But at the easy level, you can just kind of force them in and take your time and you'll get there eventually. And I think... yeah, this is it. All right.
Now, all 9 of these puzzles, like I said before, can be solved in any order, and you can move back and forth between them. However, the 10th puzzle, Dreamland, cannot be accessed until you have completed the first 9 puzzle groups. So Dreamland kind of seems like it should be the puzzle that sort of draws everything together, that sort of uses the things that you have learned from the previous puzzle groups that you have been solving and ties it all together and acts as a sort of finale to the game. What Dreamland actually is, though, is basically just a more complicated version of Synaptic Cleft. You're given a ball on a surface that has variations in it, and you have to click your mouse cursor in order to move the ball around and push it into first a key switch in order to open a hole, and then into the hole itself. And again, along the way, there are obstacles, things that will attract it and repel it. So yeah, it's basically Synaptic Cleft, but more annoying. Also have noticed the fact that Dreamland is the only puzzle group in the game where Rathbone does not come with you and play a character, and it's at this point when I need to talk about the character of Elena. Elena is Dr. Brain's niece, who shows up just barely too late to stop him from performing the experiment, and she's there with you in all of the games, remotely communicating you from outside Dr. Brain's brain. Elena's job is basically to explain each of the games, to tell you what the different difficulty levels are going to be, and to tell you how far you've come in completing different puzzle groups. She also seems to be responsible for saying a number of really very pretentious little tidbits about the brain and thought and various things like that.
In mind mapping a new world, you are creating new mental pathways that you will use to find your way.
You get those kinds of things from Rathbone too, but they're always wrapped in humor. They sound funny, they're amusing because they're in a silly accent of some kind. When Elena says them, not so much.
You have now become a world traveler in neurospace.
Which is fine when Rathbone is there to balance her out. You don't hear from her as much, but with Dreamland, it's just Elena. So after each puzzle, you get some sort of pretentious saying, and it really just gets old.
As you travel into new dimensions, you have been continually making new connections that will help you chart your course.
And of course, the problem with this is you can't move from Dreamland to some other game. This is the last one before you can complete the game, and so you're pretty much stuck here in this very thoroughly annoying and really not very challenging game. Which is a shame, because up until then, it's kind of an entertaining game. The games are interesting, the puzzles are creative, it's just this last one that's kind of a letdown. Oh, this looks familiar. So, overall, what do I think of this game? Well, there's no doubt that the game is fun and the puzzles are inventive, and it's definitely a good game for kids, both because it allows them to reason things out in many different ways, and also because there are so many different kinds of puzzles to solve. The ending is admittedly a little bit of a letdown, but up until then, it does a pretty good job of activating several different portions of the brain. I don't think the Dr. Brain series would realize its full potential until the next game in the series, but that's a review for another time. So for right now, I'll just say that for The Lost Mind of Dr. Brain, it's a good game for kids, it's a great way to teach them how to puzzle things out, and on the worth meter, I would give this a worth playing once. And that does it for this game from my childhood, and now I guess I need to just wake up. So, I'll do that. Oh, that was easy. See you next time.
Come, Rathbone, my furry cheese-eating friend.